In the heart of the dense forests of North America, where the sunlight barely pierced through the thick canopy, a bobcat roamed freely. She was a majestic creature, her fur a blend of earthy tones that camouflaged her perfectly among the trees. Her piercing eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the surroundings for any sign of danger or prey. She was a mother, and her two cubs, barely a few months old, followed her closely, their tiny paws crunching softly on the fallen leaves. The forest was their home, a sanctuary where they played, hunted, and thrived. The cubs, full of energy, would pounce on each other, their playful growls echoing through the trees. The mother watched over them with a mix of pride and caution. She knew the forest was not just a place of beauty, but also a place of peril. Yet, she felt secure in the familiarity of her territory. But the tranquility of their lives was about to be shattered. One morning, the distant sound of machinery reached the bobcat's ears. It was a sound she had never heard before, a low, menacing rumble that grew louder with each passing day. The forest, once alive with the songs of birds and the rustling of leaves, was now filled with the noise of chainsaws and bulldozers. The humans were coming, and they were bringing destruction with them. The bobcat's instincts kicked in. She knew she had to protect her cubs. She led them deeper into the forest, away from the encroaching danger. But the machines were relentless. Trees that had stood for centuries were felled in minutes, their trunks crashing to the ground with a deafening roar. The once thick forest was thinning, and the bobcat's territory was shrinking. Days turned into weeks, and the bobcat's world continued to crumble. The food sources she relied on were disappearing, scared away by the noise and destruction. Her cubs, once full of life, were now weak and hungry. The mother bobcat fought tirelessly to find food, but the forest was no longer the haven it once was. One fateful day, as the bobcat ventured out in search of food, she returned to find her den destroyed. The machines had reached even the deepest parts of the forest. Her heart sank as she searched frantically for her cubs. She called out to them, her voice a desperate howl that echoed through the barren landscape. But there was no response. Hours turned into days as the bobcat searched for her lost cubs. She scoured every inch of the forest, her hope dwindling with each passing moment. Finally, she found them, or what was left of them. The cubs, too weak to escape, had been crushed under the weight of a fallen tree. The mother bobcat let out a heart-wrenching cry, a sound so full of pain and sorrow that it seemed to silence the entire forest. Alone and broken, the bobcat wandered through the remnants of her once thriving home. The forest was now a wasteland, stripped of its beauty and life. The humans had taken everything from her home, her family, her will to live. She was a ghost of her former self, her eyes hollow and her spirit shattered. But even in her darkest hour, the bobcat's survival instincts prevailed. She knew she had to keep moving, to find a new place to call home. She ventured out of the forest into the unknown. The world outside was unfamiliar and hostile, but she had no choice. She was a creature of the wild, and the wild was all she had left. As she roamed the outskirts of human civilization, the bobcat encountered other animals, displaced, scared, and desperate, just like her. They were all victims of the same destruction, their lives upended by the relentless march of progress. The bobcat, once a solitary creature, found solace in their company. Together, they formed a fragile alliance, bound by their shared struggle for survival. But the challenges were far from over. The bobcat and her new companions faced new dangers: predators, harsh weather, and the ever-present threat of humans. They were constantly on the move, never staying in one place for too long. The bobcat's body grew weaker, her once powerful frame now gaunt and frail. Yet, she pressed on, driven by an unyielding will to survive. One night, As the bobcat lay under the cold, starry sky, she heard a familiar sound. A howl, distant but unmistakable. It was the call of another bobcat, a sound she hadn't heard in what felt like an eternity. Her heart raced as she followed the sound, her weary legs carrying her through the darkness. She found him, a male bobcat, alone and injured. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, they recognized each other. They were kindred spirits, survivors of a world that had turned its back on them. The male bobcat's injuries were severe, but the mother bobcat stayed by his side, tending to his wounds and sharing what little food she could find. Days turned into weeks, and the two bobcats formed a bond, a fragile connection that gave them both a reason to keep going. Together they faced the challenges of their new reality, finding strength in each other's presence. The mother bobcat, who had lost so much, found a glimmer of hope in this unexpected companionship. But the world was still a harsh and unforgiving place. One day, as they ventured too close to a human settlement, they were spotted. The humans, fearing for their safety, called for help. The bobcats, cornered and scared, had no choice but to fight. The mother bobcat, driven by a fierce protectiveness, stood her ground, her eyes blazing with defiance. In the end, it was a losing battle. The humans, armed with tranquilizers, subdued the bobcats. The mother bobcat, her body weak and her spirit broken, was captured. As she lay in the cold, sterile environment of a wildlife rehabilitation center, she thought of her cubs, her lost home, and the male bobcat who had given her a reason to hope. The humans, well-meaning, but oblivious to the depth of her pain, tried to nurse her back to health. But the mother bobcat's spirit was beyond repair. She had lost too much, endured too much. One night, as the moon cast its pale light through the bars of her enclosure, the mother bobcat let out one last, mournful howl, a cry that echoed through the night, a final farewell to the world that had taken everything from her. The next morning, the humans found her lifeless body. They mourned her passing, but they could never truly understand the depth of her sorrow. The mother bobcat's story was a tragic reminder of the consequences of human actions, a tale of loss, resilience, and the enduring spirit of the wild. In the end, the forest was gone, replaced by roads and buildings. The animals that once called it home were scattered, their lives forever changed. But the memory of the mother bobcat and her cubs lived on, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. And as the wind whispered through the few remaining trees, it carried with it the echoes of their howls, a mournful song for a world that could never be the same.